We feel it is necessary to point out the strong feeling in all Arab states in connection with British policy in Palestine. We assume that immediately on the outbreak of war, the necessary measures would be taken in order to bring about a complete appeasement of Arab opinion in Palestine and in neighboring countries. If we fail to retain Arab goodwill at the outset of a war, no other measures which we can recommend will serve to influence the Arab states in favor of this country. This view was expressed by British strategists on the subcommittee of the Committee of Imperial Defense in January 1939, while the Arab revolt was still raging in Palestine. The Middle East was the weak underbelly of the British Empire. Far from the home islands, the Middle East's link with Britain was maintained through the Mediterranean Sea, a water body that Mussolini's navy called home. Japanese hostility meant that the pivotal Indian colony could be threatened from the east. British officials were worried that if the Arabs of the Middle East were to rise up against the British with the ferocity seen in the Palestine revolt, Britain might lose the Middle East's oil and its primary route of communication with India. Thus, Arab restiveness had the potential to unravel the British Empire. The British also knew what was the number one cause of the acrimony felt by Arabs of all regions from Egypt to Iraq against the British: their support for Zionism. I am Dr. Hassan Bukhari, and this is the 6th episode of our series Palestine versus Israel. At the end of the last episode, we had discussed the ending of the Arab revolt with a shattering defeat for the Arabs. The Arabs lost their best either in battle or through exile or imprisonment. Their economy was decimated and their morale had been crushed. But this darkest of nights had a silver lining for them as well. Germany and Italy's continued belligerence towards Britain and France, even after the compromise at Munich, had forced Britain to accept the possibility of another world war. German and Italian support for the Arabs in case of a rebellion during a world war was a nightmare for the British. The Arabs could now hope to gain what they had lost on the battlefield. They could capitalize on British fears to secure greater concessions. They could also woo the Germans and Italians to support them. The Zionists, on the other hand, had only one option. They had to back the British, as the Germans were bent on destroying the Jews. In February 1939, Britain organized a conference at St. James' Palace in London to tackle the Palestine problem. British Colonial Secretary Malcolm MacDonald, the son of former Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald, and a non-Zionist sympathizer, presided. Arab leaders in exile in Seychelles were brought to London. The Zionists also attended, but the conference failed to achieve any agreement. After the failure of St. James' Conference, the British issued a white paper outlining their future policy in Palestine. According to many historians, the chief aim of this document was to appease the Arab and Indian Muslim opinion. The white paper declared that His Majesty's government believed that the framers of the mandate in which the Balfour Declaration was embodied could not have intended that Palestine should be converted into a Jewish state against the will of the Arab population of the country. The white paper limited Jewish immigration to 15,000 persons per year for 5 years, plus another 25,000. After 5 years and the entry of 100,000 immigrants, Jewish immigration was only to occur with Arab consent. It also strictly limited land transfers from Arabs to Jews. Another important promise made in the white paper was the promise of establishing representative institutions in Palestine after 5 years, by which time Jews would form 1/3 of the total population. The white paper declared the creation of an independent Palestine after 10 years as an objective as well. The white paper was approved in the House of Commons by a margin of 268 to 179. Approved by the British government, it nevertheless precipitated a storm of rage among the Zionists. After partnering with the British in crushing the Arab revolt, they felt their erstwhile patron had stabbed them in the back. Even the usually level-headed Chaim Weizmann thundered at Malcolm MacDonald. Are the British in Palestine with the consent of the Arabs? Ben Gurion issued a belligerent statement on behalf of the Jewish Agency. It is a policy in which the Jewish people will not acquiesce. Such a regime can only be established and maintained by force. It seems only too probable that the Jews will have to fight rather than submit to Arab rule, and repressing a Jewish rebellion against British policy will be as unpleasant a task as the repression of the Arab rebellion has been. He thundered at the Zionist Congress in August, "For us, the white paper neither exists nor can exist. We must behave as if we were the state in Palestine until we actually become the state in Palestine." Instead of using their words to denounce the white paper, Jabotinsky's revisionists turned to terrorism. The revisionist paramilitary organization, the Irgun, bombed a number of government buildings in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and sabotaged rail lines. The Arab Higher Committee also rejected the white paper. It put forward the reason that a long transitional period of 10 years favored the Zionists, but the real reason most probably was that after getting duped many times by the British, the Arabs simply didn't trust the British to keep their word over a long period spanning a decade. They knew that Britain's benevolence was only due to some temporary geopolitical calculations, and they wanted to cash in immediately. Hussein al-Khalidi, a member of the Arab Higher Committee and a former mayor of Jerusalem, put it bluntly. Britain never seriously intended for one moment to be faithful to its promises. He was proven right, as none of the provisions of the white paper apart from the restriction of immigration were ever implemented. The white paper had also subjected the establishment of representative institutions in Palestine and the eventual establishment of an independent Palestine to Jewish assent. Basically, it had granted the Zionists a veto. Like everything else in their rule over Palestine, the sole purpose of the white paper was to serve British strategic interests. They had backed the Zionists when it had been in their interest. Now they had issued this document only to gain Arab goodwill on the eve of a world war. The House of Commons, which hadn't even let Arab representatives come to Palestine for dialogue 4 years ago, had now voted in favor of a seemingly anti-Zionist policy whose architect was a man considered a Zionist sympathizer. Howard Sacker was spot on in his analysis. The MacDonald White Paper by and large succeeded in keeping the Arab world quiet, and this was its rationale. Britain and France plunged into war with Germany in September 1939. Contrary to expectations, the Germans inflicted a string of decisive defeats on the Allies. By June 1940, Germany had humbled Poland, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, and even France, where a collaborationist government was installed at Vichy with German support. With almost all of mainland Europe under his control, Hitler had lots of options open to him. He could threaten the British Isles and the British colonies from the Middle East to India. Ominously for the British, Lebanon and Syria had remained in the collaborationist Vichy government's control. This made the British position in the Middle East tenuous, as they were being threatened from the west by Italians in Libya and Ethiopia, and from the east by Vichy-controlled Lebanon and Syria. Dwindling British fortunes during the Second World War gave rise to pro-Axis sentiment among many Arab nationalists. Mufti Amin al-Husseini, who had been in Iraq since the failure of the Arab Revolt, became the most influential figure among pro-Axis Arabs. Amin al-Husseini developed an alliance with the former Iraqi Prime Minister Rashid Ali al-Gilani, who was an ardent Arab nationalist. Rashid Ali succeeded in ousting the pro-British regent of Iraq, Prince Abdul Ilah, in a coup d'etat and took power in April 1941. Soon after assuming the office of Prime Minister, Rashid Ali officially requested German help and received it through Vichy-controlled Syria. Britain had no choice but to eliminate Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon quickly, or accept defeat and abandon the Middle East with all its oil wells and geostrategic value. So, in May 1941, Britain began its own Middle Eastern blitzkrieg. Iraq, which the British could only occupy after 3 years of campaigning and suffering grave losses at the hands of the Ottomans in the First World War, fell within a month this time. 2 decades after the disaster at May Saloon, the weakness of the Arab nationalists was again exhibited before the whole world as Rashid Ali and Amin al-Husseini fled to Germany after the ignominious defeat. After Iraq, the British turned their attention to Syria and Lebanon. By July 1941, they were conquered as well, securing the British eastern flank in the Middle Eastern theatre of the Second World War. The decisive British victories in Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria ended all active Arab resistance to the British for the duration of the Second World War. But the bad days for the British weren't over yet. Arrival of the famed Afrika Corps under the legendary Field Marshal Erwin Rommel turned the tables soon. A series of British setbacks culminated in the spectacular victory for Rommel at Tobruk in June 1942. The British were forced to retreat from Libya. They ultimately halted at Al Alamein, located only about 70 miles from the vital port of Alexandria. One more successful push could have led to Egypt falling to the Axis. Palestine was naturally the next target. However, the Germans and Italians were unable to master the logistical challenges of supplying an army so far away. Rommel did try to take Al Alamein with the limited resources at his command, but failed. In November 1942, the Axis forces were decisively beaten back from Al Alamein and forced to leave Egypt, never to return. Rommel's defeat ended all Arab hopes of throwing away the British yoke and ousting the Zionists. During these tumultuous years of war, the Palestinian Arabs remained largely quiescent. No activities were launched by them against the British despite Mufti Amin al-Husseini's blandishments and exhortations from Berlin. The Mufti has been built into an Arab Nazi monster by Zionist propaganda, but in reality he had missed his shot after the failure of Rashid Ali's rebellion. Now he was a faraway and somewhat peripheral figure in Palestinian politics. His efforts to recruit Arabs for the German war effort ended in abysmal failure. His only significant contribution to the German war effort was his help in recruiting 6,000 Bosnian Muslims for the Germans. But Mufti's absence, coupled with the reputation of Nashashibis as traitors, cleared the field for the Istiqlal party in Palestine, which charted a very pragmatic course. Under the leadership of Ahmad Hilmi, Oni Abdul Hadi, and Rashid Ibrahim, the Istiqlalists tried to use the wartime economic boom in Palestine to the Arabs' advantage. They operationalized the Arab National Fund and Arab National Bank and bought land that might otherwise be used by the Zionists. They also showed acceptance towards the white paper and lobbied with partial success to get its policies implemented. The Istiqlal enjoyed support from the middle classes, but the hold of the traditional Arab elite families like the Nashashibis and the Husseinis remained strong elsewhere. This enmity for Istiqlal by the Arab traditional elite families, rooted in their political insecurity, caused the Palestinian Arabs to miss an opportunity to take advantage of the wartime situation when they would have been supported by the British as well. The Zionists, on the other hand, used the war to full advantage, despite their distaste for the white paper. Ben-Gurion declared that the Jews would fight with Great Britain in this war as if there was no white paper, and they would subsequently fight the white paper as if there was no war. Weizmann was even more effusive. It is my duty at this solemn hour to tell England and through it the Western democracies. We have grievances. But above our regret and bitterness are higher interests. What the democracies are fighting for is the minimum necessary for Jewish life. Their anxiety is our anxiety. Their war is our war. Jabotinsky also encouraged the revisionists to support the British war effort, but a small group of revisionists under Abraham Stern disagreed and formed the French faction called Leahy. It was given the name of Stern Gang by the British. The Stern Gang devoted itself to ousting the British from Palestine quickly and establishing a Zionist state by force. Abraham Stern's men orchestrated some anti-British terrorist attacks. Stern also tried to obtain German and Italian support, a strategy that resulted in much of the Zionist community denouncing him. Facing hostility from the British, Haganah, and Irgun, the British managed to kill Stern in February 1942, but his gang remained active. But even with the outbreak of the war against the common Nazi menace, all was not well between the Zionists and the British. United against the Nazis, they were bitterly divided over the present and future of Palestine. The British wanted to pull off a balancing act between the Arabs and the Zionists to prolong their rule over Palestine for as long as possible, while maintaining some goodwill among both the Arabs and Jews outside Palestine. The Zionists wanted a Jewish nation state in Palestine as soon as possible. For that, they needed the British to protect Palestine from the Germans. They also needed the British to enable them to benefit from the wartime economic and industrial boom and get their youth trained in military skills so that they could build a proper conventional army of their own after the war. But almost equally important to them was to alter Palestine's demography through immigration, an activity significantly curtailed by Britain after the White Paper of 1939. These diverse aims made the Zionist-British relationship during the Second World War a very complicated one. How did the Zionists manage to extract the most out of their collaboration with the British during the war? Concurrently, how Zionist disappointments with the British on the issue of immigration led them to find a new global patron? How was the issue of Jewish refugees of the World War used by Zionists for their political advantage? We will discuss all these questions and more in the next episode of Palestine versus Israel. Stay tuned, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.